David rubbed his tired eyes as he locked the office door behind him. Another long day at the accounting firm was finally over. The clock on his phone showed 9:30 p.m., and his stomach was growling loudly. He had skipped lunch again, too busy with spreadsheets and client calls to take a proper break. The neon lights of Chen's noodle house glowed warmly in the distance. David had been going there for almost 2 years now, ever since he started working late shifts. Mrs. Chen always gave him extra portions, probably because she felt sorry for the young man who always ate alone at the corner table. "The usual?" Mrs. Chen asked with a smile as David walked through the door. The smell of garlic and ginger filled his nose, making his stomach rumble even louder. "Yes, please, Mrs. Chen. But make it a large tonight. I'm really hungry." 20 minutes later, David was walking through the quiet streets with a warm container of beef noodles in his hand. The city felt different at night, calmer. Most people were home with their families, watching TV or getting ready for bed. But David had grown to love these peaceful evening walks. They helped him clear his head after stressful days at work. He turned into the narrow alley behind his apartment building. David heard the familiar sound of soft meowing. A small orange cat appeared from behind a trash can, followed by 2 more cats and a skinny brown dog. They had been living in this alley for months now, and David had been feeding them whenever he had extra food. "Hey there, friends," David said softly, kneeling down. The animals knew his voice by now and came closer without fear. "I brought you something good tonight." David had learned to save clean cardboard from his deliveries just for this purpose. He pulled out a piece and placed it on the ground, then opened his container of noodles. The rich smell made his mouth water, but he was too full to finish the large portion anyway. "This should keep you all happy," he said, carefully placing the noodles and some pieces of beef on the cardboard. The orange cat was the bravest and always came to eat first. The others would wait their turn patiently. David had never really thought about why he did this. His friends at work would probably call him crazy for giving away expensive restaurant food to stray animals. But something about these hungry creatures reminded him of himself when he was younger. He remembered what it felt like to go to bed with an empty stomach, back when his family didn't have much money. "Don't fight over it now," he whispered to the animals as they began to eat. "There's enough for everyone." The small ritual always made David feel better about his day. No matter how difficult his boss had been, or how many problems he had solved, at work this simple act of kindness felt like the most important thing he did each day. It reminded him that he could make a difference, even if it was just a small one. David stood up slowly, his knees creaking a bit from the long day. He was only 28, but sometimes he felt much older. The stress of city life and long work hours were taking their toll. He brushed off his pants and started walking toward the entrance of his apartment building. His keys jingled softly as he pulled them from his pocket. The old building had a heavy metal door that always stuck a little, and David had to push it with his shoulder while turning the key. Behind him he could hear the gentle sounds of the animals enjoying their meal. It was a peaceful sound that always made him smile. But as David finally got his key to turn, he heard something that made him pause. It wasn't the usual sounds of cats and dogs eating. It was something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like voices. David frowned and tilted his head, listening more carefully. The sounds were very quiet, almost whispers. But they definitely weren't coming from the animals. The words didn't sound like any language he recognized either. They had a musical quality to them, rising and falling in strange rhythms. Maybe someone else was in the alley. Sometimes homeless people would shelter there during cold nights, though it was still warm outside. David had always tried to help them too when he could, usually by leaving extra food or a few dollars. But these voices sounded different somehow, younger. And there was something about the way they spoke that made the hair on the back of David's neck stand up. Not in a scary way, but in the way you feel when something very unusual is happening. David's hand froze on his keys. Should he go inside and mind his own business? That would be the safe thing to do. He had work early tomorrow morning, and he needed his sleep. Whatever was happening in the alley was probably none of his concern, but curiosity got the better of him. David had always been the kind of person who helped others, even when it wasn't convenient. And if someone needed help, he couldn't just ignore it and go to bed. Slowly, very quietly, David turned around to look back into the alley. What he saw there would change everything. He thought he knew about the world, and about the simple act of sharing food with those who were hungry. The orange cat looked up at him and meowed once, as if trying to tell him something important was about to happen. David took a deep breath and stepped back into the shadows of the alley, his heart beating faster with each step. David's footsteps echoed softly in the narrow alley as he moved closer to where he had left the food. The whispered voices had stopped the moment he started walking back, which made everything feel even stranger. Maybe he had just imagined them. Sometimes when you're really tired, your mind can play tricks on you. But as he got closer to the spot where he had placed the cardboard, David realized the animals were no longer there. The orange cat, the two other cats, and the brown dog had all disappeared. That was unusual. They normally took their time eating, especially when he brought them such a good meal. David squinted in the dim light from the street lamp. Something was moving near the cardboard, but it was too dark to see clearly. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, pointing it toward the ground where he had left the food. What he saw made him freeze completely. 3 young women were crouched around the cardboard, eating his leftover noodles with their hands. But these weren't ordinary women. Even in the weak light from his phone, David could see that something was very different about them. Their skin seemed to glow softly, like it was made of moonlight. It wasn't bright, just a gentle shimmer that caught the light in a way that human skin never did. Their hair moved slightly even though there was no wind in the alley. And their eyes were larger than normal, with colors that seemed to shift and change as David watched. The youngest looking of the 3 had noodle sauce on her chin. When David's light hit them, all 3 looked up at him with expressions of complete shock. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The alley was so quiet that David could hear his own heart beating. The tallest one slowly started to stand up, her movements graceful but careful, like a deer that's been surprised by a hunter. Her companion stayed crouched, looking between her and David with wide, worried eyes. David's mind was racing. This couldn't be real. People didn't just glow in the dark. People's eyes didn't change colors like that. And yet, here they were, right in front of him, 3 impossible young women eating his leftovers in a dark alley. I'm sorry, the tall one said in English, though her accent was unlike anything David had ever heard. Her voice had a musical quality, like she was singing even when she was just talking. We didn't mean to take your food, we thought it was for the animals. David's mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. You can talk, he finally managed to say, which sounded stupid even as he said it. The one with shorter, silver-colored hair nodded quickly. We have been listening to your language, learning from your broadcasts and conversations. We needed to understand your people. Your people? David repeated, his voice getting higher. What do you mean, your people? Who are you? The 3 exchanged glances, and David noticed that when they looked at each other, their eyes seemed to flash with small sparks of light. It was like they were communicating without words. We are not from here, the tall one said carefully. We are travelers from very far away. Our transportation stopped working, and we have been stuck in this area for many days. David felt dizzy. He leaned against the brick wall of the building, trying to process what he was hearing. Not from here, he repeated slowly. You mean like from another country? The youngest one, who still had sauce on her chin, made a sound that might have been laughter. She said something in their musical language to her companions, and they all looked at David with what seemed like gentle amusement. Not another country, the silver-haired one said softly. Another world. What you might call a different planet. David slid down the wall until he was sitting on the ground. His phone was still shining its light on the 3 beings, and now he could see more details that made his head spin. Their clothes looked like they were made of fabric that moved and shifted like liquid. There were intricate patterns on their skin that seemed to pulse with soft light, and when they breathed, It sounded different somehow, like they were breathing different air than he was. "This isn't real," David said, more to himself than to them. "I'm dreaming. Or maybe I'm having a breakdown from working too much. People from other planets don't just show up in alleys eating Chinese food." The tall one took a careful step closer. "We know this is difficult to believe. We have watched your movies and television shows. We understand that our kind are usually portrayed as frightening or dangerous in your stories." "We are not dangerous," the youngest one said suddenly, her voice small and worried. "We were just so hungry. We have not found food that we can safely eat for many days. But when we tried your food," she gestured to the nearly empty container, "it did not make us sick like other things we have tried." David looked at the three of them crouched in his alley, eating his leftovers like hungry children. Despite how impossible the situation was, despite how much his logical mind was screaming that this couldn't be happening, David felt something familiar stir in his chest. They were hungry. Whatever they were, wherever they came from, they were hungry and alone and scared. And if there was one thing David couldn't ignore, it was someone who needed food. Are you going to hurt me?" he asked quietly. All three of them looked genuinely shocked by the question. The tall one shook, her head quickly. "Never. We do not hurt others, it is not our way. We only wanted to survive until our ship could be repaired." David sat in the alley for several more minutes, his mind trying to accept what his eyes were telling him. Three beings from another world were sitting just a few feet away from him, and they were hungry. Everything else could wait. But first, he needed to make sure they had enough to eat. "Wait here," David said, standing up slowly. "I'm going to get you more food." David's hands were shaking as he walked back to Chen's noodle house. Every few steps he stopped and looked back toward the alley, half expecting to find that the three strange beings had vanished like a dream. But each time he looked, he could still see the soft glow of their skin in the darkness. Mrs. Chen was cleaning up the kitchen when David pushed through the door. She looked surprised to see him back so soon. "David, did you forget something?" "Mrs. Chen, I need 3 more orders of the beef noodles, large portions, and maybe some vegetable soup too, and rice, lots of rice." The words tumbled out of his mouth so fast that Mrs. Chen frowned with concern. "Are you having a party? It's very late for guests." David paused, realizing how strange he must sound. I have some friends who are really hungry. They haven't eaten in days." Mrs. Chen's expression immediately softened. She had always had a kind heart for people in need. "Oh, poor things. You wait here. I'll make fresh food for your friends." While Mrs. Chen worked in the kitchen, David paced back and forth in the empty restaurant. His mind kept going in circles. Beings from another planet, in his alley, eating his leftovers. It sounded like something from a movie, not something that could happen in real life. But he had seen them with his own eyes. He had heard them speak. And most importantly, he had seen the hunger in their faces. That was something David understood. Something that felt real and immediate no matter how impossible everything else seemed. 20 minutes later, David was walking back through the alley with 4 large bags of food and several bottles of water. The 3 beings were exactly where he had left them, though now they had moved to sit on some old wooden crates that someone had left behind a delivery truck. As David approached, they all stood up quickly. The tall one stepped forward slightly as if protecting the other 2. "You came back," she said, and David could hear the surprise in her voice. "Of course I came back. I said I would." David set the bags down on the ground and started pulling out containers. "Mrs. Chen made fresh food for you. She was worried when I told her my friends were hungry." The youngest one made that musical laughing sound again. "She thinks we are your friends." "Well, aren't you?" David asked, then felt a bit silly. He didn't even know their names yet. The tall one tilted her head, considering his words. "We would be honored to be considered your friends. My name is Luna." She gestured to her companions. "This is Vera," she indicated the silver-haired one. "And this is Kira." The youngest one waved shyly. "I'm David," he said, sitting down on the ground across from them. "And I have about 1,000,000 questions, but first, please eat. You said you've been hungry for days." The three beings sat back down and opened the containers with careful, reverent movements. When they tasted the fresh noodles, their faces lit up with joy. Kira actually made small, happy sounds as she ate, like a contented cat. "This is wonderful," Vera said between bites. "We have tried many foods from your world, but most made us very sick. This is the first that has truly nourished us." "How long have you been here?" David asked, watching them eat with the intensity of people who hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. 17 of your days," Luna replied. "Our scout ship was damaged when we passed through what you call a solar storm. We crashed in the forest outside your city, but we were able to hide the ship from your people." "Scout ship?" David's eyes widened. "Are there more of you coming?" All three of them shook their heads quickly. No, Vera assured him. "We are explorers, not invaders. We travel in small groups, studying different worlds and their people. We were only supposed to observe your planet for a few days before moving on." Kira looked up from her soup with broth still on her chin. "But then our ship broke and we got stuck. We've been trying to fix it, but we need materials that are hard to find here." David found himself relaxing as they talked. Despite their otherworldly appearance, they seemed genuine and kind. Their concern for each other was obvious, and their gratitude for the food was touching. "Why didn't you ask for help sooner?" David asked. "I mean, from humans. From people like me." Luna and Vera exchanged one of those silent, flashing looks again. "Your species has many stories about beings like us," Luna said carefully. "In your movies and books, encounters between our kinds usually end badly. We thought it was safer to stay hidden." "But you're not hiding now," David pointed out. Kira spoke up, her voice soft but clear. "We watched you feed the animals every night. You shared your food even when you looked tired and hungry yourself. We thought maybe someone who cares for hungry creatures might care for hungry travelers too." The simple honesty in her words made David's chest feel warm. "So, you've been watching me?" "For many nights," Vera admitted. "We were trying to learn about humans by observing you. But you were different from what we expected. Most of the humans we saw during the day seemed rushed and angry. But you were gentle, patient, kind to creatures that could give you nothing in return." David felt his cheeks redden. I don't like seeing anything go hungry. When I was a kid, we didn't have much food sometimes. I remember what that felt like." "That is why we decided to trust you," Luna said. "Your actions showed us your character better than any words could." As they continued eating, David learned more about his new friends. They came from a world called Zephyr, which orbited a distant star. Their people were explorers and scientists, traveling the galaxy to learn about other forms of life. They had been studying Earth for several months from space before their ship malfunctioned. "What's it like?" David asked. "Your world, I mean." Kira's eyes lit up. "Oh, it's beautiful. We have floating cities that move with the wind currents, and the sunsets last for hours because we have 2 suns. And the flowers sing when the morning comes." "Flowers that sing?" David smiled. "That sounds amazing." "What is your world like?" Vera asked. "Beyond this city, I mean. We have only seen small parts of it." David spent the next hour describing Earth to them, the oceans and mountains, the different seasons, the various animals and plants. He told them about different countries and cultures, about art and music and literature. The three beings listened with fascination, asking questions and marveling at the diversity of human civilization. "Your world is more complex than we realized," Luna said thoughtfully. "Our initial observations did not capture the full beauty of human society." "It's not perfect," David admitted. "We have problems. Wars and poverty and pollution. People can be cruel to each other sometimes. All worlds have such struggles," Vera said gently. "What matters is that there are also people like you. People who choose kindness when they could choose indifference." As the night grew later, David found himself wishing this conversation could go on forever. These three beings had opened his eyes to wonders beyond his imagination, and yet they seemed as fascinated by his ordinary human life as he was by their extraordinary origins. But Kira was starting to yawn, and David realized they must be exhausted. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "Where do you sleep?" "In our damaged ship," Luna replied. "It is hidden, but not comfortable. The sleeping chambers were damaged in the crash." David made a decision that surprised even him. "Would you like to stay in my apartment tonight? I have a couch and some extra blankets. It has to be more comfortable than a broken spaceship." The three beings looked at each other with those flashing eye conversations, then back at David with expressions of amazement. "You would trust us in your home?" Vera asked softly. "You trusted me with the truth about who you are," David replied. "I think we're even." David's apartment had never felt so small. As he unlocked his door and turned on the lights, he suddenly saw his little one-bedroom home through the eyes of visitors from another world. The old couch with its faded blue fabric, the small TV balanced on a wooden crate, the stack of bills on his kitchen counter. Everything seemed ordinary and probably very strange to his new friends. Luna, Vera, and Kira stepped inside carefully, their glowing skin casting soft patterns on the walls. They moved with the cautious grace of people entering a sacred space, touching nothing without permission. "Please make yourselves comfortable," David said, gesturing toward the couch. "It's not much, but it's warm and dry." Kira immediately went to the window and looked out at the city lights stretching into the distance. "So many lights," she whispered in wonder, "like stars, but arranged in patterns." "Those are buildings where people live and work," David explained. "Millions of people in the city alone." "Millions?" Vera's eyes widened. "We knew your planet was populated, but we had not imagined such numbers. How do you all find enough food?" David realized how much he took for granted. "We have farms and factories that produce food, markets and restaurants where you can buy it, though not everyone always has enough," he added, thinking of the homeless people he sometimes saw on his way to work. Luna was examining his bookshelf with fascination. "You store knowledge in these physical objects?" "Books, yes. Though most, people use computers and phones now for information." David pulled out his phone and showed them the screen. "This little device can connect to almost all the knowledge in the world." The three beings gathered around the phone like children seeing magic for the first time. When David showed them videos of different parts of Earth, mountains, oceans, forests, animals, they gasped and pointed with excitement. "Your world is incredibly diverse," Luna said, watching a video of dolphins jumping out of the ocean. "We have water creatures on Zephyr, but nothing quite like these." "What are the creatures like on your world?" David asked, settling into his old armchair while his guests examined everything in his apartment with wonder. Kira's face lit up immediately. "Oh, we have the singing birds that build nests in the clouds, and there are creatures that look like your butterflies, but they're as big as your cats and they glow different colors when they're happy." "And the tree shepherds," Vera added with a smile. "They're tall, gentle beings that take care of the forests. They can communicate with plants and help them grow strong and healthy." David listened with amazement as they described their home world. Crystal formations that grew music when the wind blew through them. Floating islands that drifted across purple seas. Cities built inside massive trees that had been growing for thousands of years. "It sounds beautiful," David said. "Do you miss it?" "Very much," Luna admitted, her voice soft with homesickness. "But this experience has been valuable too. We have learned that intelligence and kindness can develop in many different forms across the universe." As the night went on, David made hot tea for everyone. He was surprised to discover that his new friends could drink it without any problems. They seemed delighted by the warmth and flavor, especially when he added honey. "This sweet substance comes from insects?" Kira asked, stirring her tea with fascination. "Bees," David confirmed. "They collect nectar from flowers and make honey from it. They're very important for our food system because they help plants reproduce." "Remarkable," Vera said. "On our world we have similar creatures, but they create a substance that tastes like what you call chocolate. You have chocolate bees? David laughed. That sounds amazing. The conversation flowed easily between them. David found himself sharing stories about his childhood, his job, his dreams of maybe traveling the world someday. In return, Luna, Vera, and Kira told him about their journey across space, the other worlds they had visited, and the incredible sights they had seen. We visited a world where the mountains float in the sky, Vera said, her eyes distant with memory, and another where the entire surface is covered in what you might call gemstones, but they grow like plants. Have you met other intelligent species? David asked. I mean, besides humans? Many, Luna nodded. Some are very different from both our kinds. We met beings made of pure energy who communicate through light patterns, and others who are more like your machines but with consciousness and emotions. Are they all friendly? Most are, Kira said. Though some prefer to be left alone. We always respect their wishes. The universe is big enough for all different kinds of life. David made up the couch with his best blankets and pillows. As he worked, he noticed that his guests were growing tired. Their skin was glowing less brightly and Kira was yawning frequently. The couch folds out into a bed, David explained, showing them how it worked. It should be big enough for all three of you, but if you need more space, I can sleep on the floor and you can have my bedroom. This is more than generous, Luna said, running her hand over the soft blankets. We have not slept in comfort since our ship was damaged. What will you do tomorrow? David asked. About fixing your ship, I mean. The three friends exchanged glances. We have been working on repairs each day, Vera explained, but we need specific materials that are difficult to obtain without revealing ourselves to your authorities. What kind of materials? Rare metals, mostly, and certain crystals that conduct energy in ways your current technology does not utilize. David thought for a moment. I might be able to help with that. I have a friend who works at an electronics recycling center. They break down old computers and phones to recover valuable metals, and I know someone else who collects rocks and minerals as a hobby. You would do that for us? Kira asked, her large eyes shining with hope. Of course. You're my friends now. Friends help each other. Luna stood and walked over to David. For a moment, he thought she might hug him, but instead she placed her hand over her heart and bowed slightly. On our world, this gesture means that you have honored us greatly, she said. We will remember your kindness for all our lives, and we will tell others of our people about the human who showed us that intelligence is not the only measure of a species' worth, Vera added. Compassion is equally important. As David prepared for bed, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just one evening. This morning, he had been a lonely accountant whose biggest excitement was feeding stray cats. Now he was hosting visitors from another world and planning to help them repair their spacecraft, but somehow it didn't feel as strange as it should have. Luna, Vera, and Kira were different from any people he had ever met, but they were still people. They had feelings, fears, hopes, and dreams, just like humans did. They missed their home, cared about each other, and were grateful for kindness shown to them. Before turning off the lights, David checked on his guests one more time. They were curled up together on the fold-out bed, their soft glow creating a peaceful light in the dark room. Kira was already asleep, making small content sounds like a sleeping child. Luna and Vera were whispering quietly in their musical language, probably discussing the day's events. Thank you, David, Luna said softly when she noticed him in the doorway. For the food, for the shelter, for treating us like friends instead of strangers. Thank you, David replied, for trusting me with the truth. This has been the most incredible day of my life. As David lay in his own bed, staring at the ceiling, he wondered what tomorrow would bring. Whatever happened, he knew that his life would never be quite the same again. And for the first time in years, that thought filled him with excitement instead of fear. The next morning, David woke up to the smell of something he couldn't identify. For a moment, he lay in bed confused, wondering if he had dreamed the entire previous evening. But then he heard soft voices speaking in that musical language, and he remembered everything. David found his 3 guests in the kitchen, standing around his small stove with expressions of concentration. Vera was carefully stirring something in a pan, while Luna and Kira watched nervously. "Good morning," David said, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What are you making?" "We wanted to prepare breakfast for you," Kira said, bouncing slightly with excitement, "to thank you for your hospitality." "We found ingredients in your food storage," Vera added, "and we're attempting to create something from our world that might be compatible with your taste preferences." David peered into the pan and saw what looked like scrambled eggs, but they had a slight golden shimmer and smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. "It smells amazing." "What is it?" "On Zephyr, we call it Morning Harmony," Luna explained. "It's made from the eggs of cloudbirds mixed with nectar from singing flowers. We adapted the recipe using your chicken eggs and some sweet substances we found." David took a cautious bite, and his eyes widened. It was the most delicious thing he had ever tasted, creamy and sweet, with flavors that seemed to change as he chewed. "This is incredible. You could make a fortune selling this recipe." The 3 friends laughed at his enthusiasm. Over breakfast, they discussed plans for the day. David had called in sick to work, the first time he had ever done so for personal reasons, so he could help them gather materials for their ship repairs. "I still can't believe this is really happening," David said as they walked through the morning streets toward the recycling center. "Yesterday, I was just a regular guy going to work every day. Today, I'm helping aliens fix their spaceship." "You were never just a regular guy," Luna said gently. "Regular people don't spend their own money to feed hungry animals every night. Regular people don't invite strangers into their homes when those strangers need help." At the recycling center, David's friend Jake was happy to let them search through bins of old electronics. While David explained that he was working on an art project that needed specific metals, Luna, Vera, and Kira used some kind of sensing ability to identify useful materials. "These components contain the right crystalline structures," Vera whispered to David, holding up what looked like old circuit boards. "And these metal strips have the conductivity we need." Jake was impressed by how knowledgeable David's art project partners seemed about electronics. "Where did you find these assistants?" he asked. "They know more about rare earth metals than most engineers I've met." "They're exchange students," David said, hoping Jake wouldn't ask too many questions. "Very advanced program." Over the next several hours, they visited 3 more locations. At a rock shop, the elderly owner was delighted to discuss mineral properties with Luna, who asked incredibly detailed questions about crystal formations. At an electronics surplus store, Kira's enthusiasm for unusual components charmed the clerk into giving them a significant discount. "Your friends are fascinating," the rock shop owner told David as they prepared to leave. "I've been collecting minerals for 40 years, and I've never met anyone with such an intuitive understanding of crystal structures." By late afternoon, they had gathered everything needed for the repairs. David's guests were practically glowing with excitement, literally as their skin shimmer had increased with their emotional state. "We should be able to complete repairs tonight," Luna said as they walked back toward David's apartment. "Our companion Zara has been working on the ship while we gathered materials. With these components, we can restore full power and navigation." David felt a strange mixture of happiness and sadness. He was thrilled that his new friends would be able to continue their journey and return home safely. But he was also going to miss them terribly. "Will I ever see you again?" he asked quietly. The 3 stopped walking and looked at each other with those silent, flashing conversations. Then Kira stepped forward and took David's hand. Her skin was warm and seemed to tingle with gentle energy. "Our people have a saying," she said. "The universe is vast, but kindness creates connections that span any distance. We will remember you always, and somehow, someday, our paths will cross again." "Besides," Vera added with a smile, "now that we know humans are capable of such goodness, our people will want to learn more about your species. You may have started something much bigger than you realize." That evening, David helped carry the materials to where their ship was hidden. The walk through the forest outside the city felt surreal, like something from a dream. When they reached a clearing surrounded by tall trees, Luna made a gesture with her hand, and suddenly a sleek silver craft appeared, where before there had been only empty space. Camouflage technology, Luna explained, seeing David's amazed expression. We've been parked here the entire time. The ship was beautiful, with flowing curves that seemed to follow some natural pattern. Another being emerged from an opening in the side. This was Zara, their companion who had been working on repairs. She was taller than the others, with skin that had a blue tint and hair that moved like liquid starlight. So this is the human who has been helping you, Zara said, studying David with curiosity. Luna has told me much about your kindness. Working together, they installed the new components and materials. David couldn't understand the technology, but he could see how the ship came back to life as systems powered up and lights began glowing throughout the craft. It's working, Vera said, relief clear in her voice. We can go home. As the ship hummed, with restored power, Kira disappeared inside and returned with something in her hands. It looked like a smooth stone, but it pulsed with soft inner light. This is for you, she said, placing it in David's palm. It's a harmony stone from our world. It will purify any water you touch it to, and it will last for many human lifetimes. Maybe it will help you continue helping others. And this, Luna added, giving him what appeared to be a small crystal pendant, will let you understand and speak any language you encounter. There are many people on your own world who could use a friend who can truly communicate with them. David felt tears in his eyes as he accepted the gifts. I don't know what to say. These are incredible. Say that you'll remember us, Vera said softly, and that you'll continue being the kind person you are. The universe needs more people like you. I couldn't forget you if I tried, David replied. You've changed my whole understanding of what's possible in this universe. As his friends prepared to board their ship, Kira suddenly ran back and hugged David tightly. Her embrace felt like being wrapped in warm starlight. Thank you for feeding us when we were hungry, she whispered. Thank you for seeing us as friends instead of monsters. Thank you for showing us that some humans have hearts as vast as space itself. One by one, Luna, Vera, and Zara also embraced David. Then they boarded their ship, and David stepped back to a safe distance. The craft rose silently into the night sky, its silver surface reflecting the moon and stars. As it climbed higher, it began to shimmer and fade until it was just another point of light among the stars. David stood in the clearing for a long time, holding the gifts his friends had given him and looking up at the sky. When he finally walked back through the forest toward the city, he felt different somehow, larger, more connected to the vast universe around him. The next evening, he returned to his usual routine of feeding the stray animals in the alley. But now, as he placed food on the cardboard and spoke gently to the cats and dog, he found himself looking up at the stars and wondering what other travelers might be out there, hungry and far from home. A week later, David used the Harmony Stone to purify water for a homeless family camping near the river. The week after that, he used the translation pendant to help a lost tourist who spoke no English find her way back to her hotel. David realized that his three friends had been right. Kindness does create connections that span any distance, and sometimes a simple act of sharing food with someone who's hungry can change not just their life, but your own life, and maybe even the course of history itself. Every night, as David continued his ritual of feeding the stray animals, he thought about Luna, Vera, and Kira somewhere among the stars, and he smiled, knowing that somewhere in the vast universe, three beings were telling their people about the human who proved that kindness is truly a universal language.